Everything was so simple, and yet ever so complex. The universe was new to me, and there were points in which I just wanted to sit down and admire the landscape. I was a kid. My emotions often got the better of me, and I was fairly lonely. It was just me and my grandfather, as we explored the fourth dimension as exiles. I kept a diary from a young age, and although we were always on the move, I was, and still am, fairly consistent in updating it. I always found it easier to maintain a diary if it were audible, such as mine. Recently, I have learnt the truth on who I am, how I have been manipulated, and what I must do next. It is now that I reflect on my diary and address what has happened. Everything has changed, and now I am a warrior with a vendetta. I wasn't always like this, though. There was once a time in which I was a squeamish, curious time-tot, with a knack for getting into trouble. That Susan is no more. Only Lady Larn remains now. In my diary, I often wrote about my thoughts on a day that was very important for me. Arguably the most important day of my life. The day we ran away. The day I lost my home. And the day everything changed forever. The day we left Gallifrey.
We ran, and we never stopped running. Well, my grandfather was obviously rather slow due to his age, but on that day he ran faster than ever. Gallifrey was in chaos, and I could barely think nor see what was going on around me. My grandfather held me close. He'd awakened me in the middle of the night and was talking about how it wasn't safe to stay on the planet. Fair to say, I wasn't expecting this, but the thought of exploring the wider universe was thrilling. To study new worlds and witness events from the past, it sounded so majestic and wonderful. Days on Gallifrey were mundane, and all fell into the same category, which was pure boredom. I had a passion for studying, although when it came to my tutors, they didn't like me one bit. My grandfather's reputation preceded him, you see, and, well, he never got on well with most, if not all, of his tutors, and not to mention his controversial views as he grew older. Ever since we have escaped from our homeworld, we have been to so many exciting and unique planets, such as going to see the Festival of Offerings, Sol 3, and so many other wonderful worlds and events with my grandfather by my side. Me and my grandfather have always been close, although, for the most part, a lot of my memories of him earlier on in my childhood are fuzzy, and I have dreams that interpret my grandfather as a founder of my Gallifreyan house. But I deem these works as mere fictions, concocted from the depth of my mind. Perhaps it is because we call the founders of our houses grandfathers after all. Then again, there are times in which I don't trust my own mind, with my thoughts and memories being all jumbled. There are so many reasons why we left Gallifrey, and that reasoning is always different every time I think about it. There are times in which I believe I've named our TARDIS, but then I remember that I didn't. There are times in which I remember my grandmother Patience talking to my grandfather about the death of my mother, and him taking me away from Gallifrey. Surely he wasn't planning on embarking on this adventure that early. Alongside those thoughts, are thoughts of looms and experimental equipment that plague my mind when I go to sleep at night. I don't even know why I know what looms are, but my mind informs me. I remember vivid memories of visiting Tesserus and selling books on the streets there, my grandfather saving me from a riot in Gallifrey. I remember the small white house me and my grandfather lived in, and I adored it. It was small and cosy. Not normal for Gallifrey, but we accepted the weird glances we got. I was shielded from Gallifrey a lot of the time within that house, as if my grandfather was hiding me. I didn't like it and just wanted to be like the other time tots. I regretted that when I was taken for initiation one night and looked into the Antepus Schism, a hole in the fabric of time itself. The fourth dimension within my very eyes, and I remember being so incredibly afraid. So afraid that I ran faster than ever before. I remember grabbing a hold of my grandfather in tears, and he calmed me by telling me stories of when he ran away and how we will run away together. So many conflicting memories and terrifying nightmares leaves me wondering just how I am related to my grandfather. Just why do I have so many of these dreams and nightmares and memories? Who am I? Sometimes I even forget my own Gallifreyan name, as if it is locked away from me. Sometimes it's Arkytior, sometimes it's Lady Larn, and sometimes it's the Earth translation, Rose. But ever since I chose my pseudonym, I've stuck with it, that being Susan. I rather like it. According to my grandfather, my original name is now a state secret, and I think that one is Arkytior, but once again, I'm not really sure on it all. Everything I know about myself is in a state of flux, and I don't know if I should tell my grandfather or if I can. I feel as if telling my grandfather all of this would put us in danger somehow. It feels as if these are state secrets, as our people called them. I have no idea why my own name is a state secret, and I'm just so confused on it all. Why don't I know my relation to my own grandfather? Does it truly matter? Why does someone know the other come to my mind whenever I think about this? Oh, what is wrong with me? All I know is that I enjoy travelling with my grandfather, I truly do. No matter how much I want to live a normal life, I have learnt so much from my experiences within the TARDIS and seen things that nobody would believe. It is lonely, and sometimes I do witness a horrific event or two, but the beauty of the universe and time itself is worth it. I'm optimistic for the future, the past, and the present. Optimistic that no matter where we end up, we are going to have the time of our lives getting there. Perhaps I'll find the answers I'm looking for, or perhaps it doesn't matter, and I'm just overthinking things. Anyhow, back to the adventure.
I would often talk about my mother as time went on. I never really got the chance to know her, nor what happened to her, but my imagination ran wild as a teenager in Earth terms. It was in this phase of my life that I found myself wanting more answers. I wish I was more curious at the time. The answers I have now would have changed everything and would have given me a sense of independence and ended the charade that was my freedom. Perhaps I wouldn't have met David, and perhaps I wouldn't have destined him for death. I would imagine how my mother looked, and how she would talk to me, what she would say, and how she would act. Being locked in a dark junkyard for what seemed like decades to me was boring. I saw the junkyard and TARDIS as home, but in truth, I wanted to gaze upon the sights of the outside world. At the time, I didn't know why my grandfather chose this junkyard, nor how my mother had died. I was only told the bare minimum of how it all happened, as if the Time Lords didn't want me to look back at my heritage. But my grandfather was stopped from doing so as well. It is only now that I know why they did so. For the record, I lived a good life on Earth after my grandfather left me there. I don't necessarily regret living that life, but it's what I know now that completely changes it and what happened. Ever since that time, I have seen what both the Daleks and the Time Lords are capable of, fought in their petty wars, and seen the family I held close to me brutally massacred as if they were nothing. Now I know that me and my family's involvement in it was all orchestrated, and I know exactly who was behind it. Although I did enjoy my life with David and Alex, it was stressful maintaining and fixing Earth. It was when I met my grandfather in his 8th incarnation that my life at first was better. But then it all fell apart when my son was exterminated. I was left alone to mourn, and it broke my heart. I understood that my grandfather was also mourning. But once again he locked me out of my ship, and it once again broke my heart in a way I can't describe. My husband David died earlier in my lifetime on Earth, and it was at this time that I joined the council and tried to make a difference. I wanted Alex to be educated on Gallifrey, but he couldn't. I stopped numerous attacks on Earth alongside the Doctor, and I realized he wanted to bring Alex with him to travel, but he chose to depart. I blame myself for his death sometimes. It's only natural, I suppose. But I just don't know what to think. And now I blame myself more than ever after what I have found out. But most of all, I blame the Time Lords. And for good reason, which I shall get to. I later joined the Time War after my grandfather tried to stop me, and the rest I will get onto later. For now, I want to look back at what humans call their teenage years, although at the time I was in my 70s. But that in itself is a contradictory nightmare, and was attending a school in Shoreditch. At the time, I was extremely vocal in my diary about the state of my life on Gallifrey, and what life I wanted on Earth.
I often imagine that my mother was a kind woman. She would tuck me into bed every night before I go to sleep, and would tell me similar stories to the ones my grandfather told me. He often told me stories of a hermit on top of a mountain, the stories told by his mother, such as the 3 little Sontarans, the Emperor Dalek's new clothes, Maximelos and the 3 Ogrons, tales of the first meteor storm he witnessed with his father, and stories of the wider universe, and that we would explore it together. He got a lot of the facts wrong at the time, but he could have been an author, and according to him he almost was at one point. In truth, I'm not sure what happened to my parents, but it was around the time I was born apparently. I'm still not sure. My heritage is completely unknown to me, apart from my grandfather, and sometimes I like to imagine all of them, but don't tell my grandfather that. He simply wouldn't understand. The truth about my family is unknown to me alongside many truths. Perhaps the truths I am yet to learn will be clearer to me one day. Perhaps I will know what truly happened to my mother, and perhaps we'll get out of this boring old junkyard again and buy a regular house, like the White House we had on Gallifrey somewhere nearby, and I can attend Coal Hill full time. After all, I rather like my tutors, Shivani, who was attacked, and I sorely miss her, the head teacher Harvey, that strange time-travelling bounty hunter teacher named River that recently left, Barbara and Ian, who are my personal favourite tutors. Those 2 look at me like I'm weird, and sometimes I feel out of place or out of time, shall I say. But I'm happy here, even if I'm still lonely. I remember the time I brought in a diamond as an attempt to gain some attention, but I soon realised that that is not how things work here. I remember attending the Time Lord Academy for a while, kind of, and know that Coal Hill is very different, but I love it. This world is so primitive, yet so freeing. We aren't restricted by glass barriers or dry lands or draconian laws that don't work, and can enjoy the world we live in. When I was a child, me and my grandfather would sit atop the mountain of perdition and look out to the two suns of my world, watching as they set. It was beautiful. But once again, what's the use in a beautiful world if nobody can make a difference and if it's restricted? Our people saw themselves as perfect. Thus, new viewpoints were shunned, such as that of my grandfather's. He believed there is evil in the universe, and when he went into politics, let's just say, they didn't have any respect for my grandfather nor his ideas. As much as I want to find a new planet to stay on, I never want to go back to Gallifrey. It feels as if I was constantly being trained and monitored, as if I were living a life of duty. I was lonely and afraid, as I was tasked with tasks that none of the other students were tasked with. I do often think back and wonder what they were training me for, if anything at all. Perhaps it is just me being paranoid. It was bound to happen with me and my grandfather being on the run. Today was the same as every other day. I went to school and I walked back to our junkyard. Our bleak and foggy junkyard that I still want to escape from. I have dreams of unexplored places, like the islands of Fiji and the hidden city of Atlantis that humanity ignores, that I want to explore. But no, my grandfather states that the TARDIS has everything I could possibly want within. But I just think he doesn't understand what I'm feeling. We have visited Earth in the past, of course. We did indeed study the world and go back in time to France to watch their revolutions unfold. Berlin, Keelmouth, Jerusalem, Rome, Paris, and a few more places. But there is one theme that ties all those adventures together. They all begin and end in chaos, either because the time period we have visited is hostile, or we just get into trouble. My thoughts when leaving Gallifrey weren't just adventures in which we vanquished evil or got into trouble, but adventures in which we can enjoy the worlds and times we visit. And now that we have finally got that, a place in which we can relax and explore in a way that doesn't end in chaos, I'm locked in a junkyard and only really go outside to go to school. A great school, if a little primitive. But I want to do more. Truth is, I feel conflicted on what I want in a way. I'm only 74 years old, and I have all of my life ahead of me, but I just don't know. I want a place to stay, but not a dark junkyard in the middle of nowhere. I want a normal life, but I want to see new sights. I want a healthy mix of both in a way, and yet it feels as if my wishes will never be granted, and I'm destined to live in this junkyard forever. I will never know what the Time Lords saw in me. We shall never return home, and I will never have the chance to learn the truth. Still, I have hope that one day I shall go back. Yes, one day, and on that day I shall learn the truth.
All of the pent-up feelings from when I was a time tot up until now that I simply couldn't talk about alongside the death of my family, living alone, and the truths I have now learnt have swayed me onto the path that I am now on. A path that my grandfather would disapprove of, but he doesn't control me anymore. I am no longer a puppet. and I have cut my strings in a manner of speaking. It is only now that I know the truth that I was looking for when I was a young girl. I know my past, and I know my destiny. I know that my mother died in the process of giving birth to me due to Pythia's curse. Pythia's curse was a curse unleashed upon Gallifrey that ceased all natural births. I was the last natural-born child there. And it was my grandfather who went by the other at the time that hid this from me. Hid the way my mother died from me. I know of my contradictory heritage, and the Time Lords that are my true descendants, and so much more. My life has led me towards the Time War. It has become my instinct to fight Daleks, but that was always their plan. The Time Lord that is through the Time War, they have been manipulating my life from the day I was born, crafting me into their perfect warrior in case the Doctor wasn't compliant or died prior to the war. And even if he wasn't, they still had plans for me. Plans I think my grandfather knew deep down, which was probably one of the reasons he tried to prevent me from joining the war. My very creation was manipulated into being by the Time Lords. The Time Lords are as corrupt as their reputation states. And now, I am on my own. No grandfather, no David, no Alex, no parents, no home, and no hope. My name is Lady Larn, and I am a descendant of Rassilon, and the other at the same time. I am a product of this Time War, and my purpose is to survive it and continue the legacy of our people, but I say no! It is time that I take control, that I decide my destiny! I know who I want to be, what I want to be. I am the Time Lord victorious, and now work alongside the Emperor as his Lord Burner, wiping out universes that I deem fit, universes that are plagued with variants of my people. The Emperor came to me one night during the war and showed me the truth of who I am and what the Time Lords crafted me into. A weapon destined to win the war. I have had it with people who believe they understand me. People who try to control me and rule over my life as if I am nothing but their plaything. The Time Lords, my grandfather, the Daleks, and so much more. My whole life has been that of a lie, a deception crafted in war. My son was murdered for nothing. Nothing but bloodshed, and in that I shall deliver. I am the last of my family, and soon to be the last of my people, and I declare that there shall be no more Time Lords in this pitiful universe. Entropy is the only way forward. This ends now. Everything has led to this. Escaping from Gallifrey, relying on my grandfather, and never standing up to him as we resided in a junkyard. Meeting David, the birth of my son, fighting in the Time War. All deceptions, love and loss, good and evil, all lies. Even the loss of my family, the family I truly loved, was manipulated into happening by the Time Lords. I believed it was my fault. That if I wasn't there, then perhaps they would still be alive. But apparently, I was destined to be there. The Emperor has given me a way of enacting revenge on a way of making a better universe. A multiverse in which free will is not a deception. A multiverse in which we choose our destinies instead of being toyed with by a higher power for their entertainment, for their own benefit. I'm sick and tired of being manipulated, being lonely, and it's time I seek more. It's time that I seek my